Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Under Armour Flow Dynamic. So 3 pros that I have with the Flow Dynamic is number 1, I think if you're wanting a training shoe for a little bit of HIIT workouts, a little bit of strength training, but then primarily for running, whether that be before or after your training session, this could be a good model to look into. Compared to other cross-training shoes and training shoes at that, this model will give you a slightly more running shoe feel. It is essentially what I would call a pseudo running shoe slash training shoe. Honestly, it's trying to walk this line in between, and I don't think it's really delivering on either end, and I'll talk about that in my cons, but it does a pretty good job for adding some miles before or after your workout and giving you a pretty comfortable ride. So I think if you are after a shoe that can be comfortable for that context, then you will like the Flow Dynamic. The second pro that I have with the shoe is I do like the Flow midsole. So similar to the Under Armour Flow Velocity Wind 2, I like the midsole in that model because it is fairly responsive. It gives you a nice lightweight ride. So from a lightweight and responsive point of view, this midsole does a really good job. And I think if you're gonna be using this shoe for treadmill running, for example, and doing like faster intervals, I think that's where this shoe is going to excel the most. Now, when it comes to outdoor training, I think the sole will be a little bit hit or miss, and I'll also talk about my cons. But if you're gonna be using this shoe on the treadmill or on the salt runner, I think you will like this model's overall responsiveness and performance, and it should last you a little bit longer. The third pro that I have with the shoe is I like the IntelliKnit upper from a comfort standpoint. So this knit upper stretches really well. It feels pretty comfortable on the foot. It hugs the foot pretty well. And so from a more casual point of view, this upper does a really good job. It breathes well, it feels lightweight, it gives you a nice hug back here through the midfoot and boot, but it's not the most secure, and I'll also talk about that in my cons. So that being said, I think if you're somebody who generally likes knit uppers and you like an upper that has a lot of stretch to it, because this knit does have a lot of stretch, then you will resonate with this model. It's lightweight, it's breathable, hugs the foot well. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with the Flow Dynamic. So when it comes to the cons in the Under Armour Flow Dynamic, I'm not gonna lie, but this shoe has been a pretty dang big letdown. So my 3 major cons that I have with this shoe is number 1, this shoe I think is marketed as being like a really good everything style shoe, and you could use them for everything. And one of the perks on the site of this shoe is that the outsole material is super durable and increases ground traction. I don't find that to be true whatsoever. Even when doing sled pushes with only 4 plates, which is really not that heavy in the context of sled pushes, I was sliding so bad in the shoe that it was pretty much unbearable to really push and drive through the forefoot or even do sled pulls. So when it comes to training on turf, this is not gonna be your best shoe. And honestly, being a shoe that's designed for like athletes and cross training, I think that's a huge knock on this model, because a lot of athletes and lifters are gonna be training on turf in that context. So that is not going to be a perk of the shoe, and honestly, I feel like that's a little bit misleading to say that this shoe has a ton of ground traction, because with this foam outsole tread here, you're not going to have that much traction, in my opinion, on certain surfaces, turf being one of them. The second drawback that I have with the shoe, and this is going back to what the site says, is that you have the lateral TPU wrap up for added stability and lateral support. So through the boot back here, sure, you have a little bit of support, but the problem is that when you're doing lateral work like skater strides or anything where you're gonna be a little bit more forefoot dominant, this knit upper just does not lock you down. I was honestly using these for one of my warm-ups the other day, doing skater strides, and I almost rolled my ankle because the knit upper here is literally so loose that you just end up having a ton of spillover when doing any form of lateral bounding. So I'm not convinced that the lateral support in this shoe is going to be enough for some folks, especially for athletes and lifters who are a little bit more heavy set, who do need more lateral support. So another knock against the shoe, on top of them lacking grip on turf, is that from a multi-directional standpoint, this upper just doesn't deliver, and that's why in my pros, I mentioned that it's pretty good for casual use and comfort, but when it comes to really getting into your training, this would not be a shoe that I want to use for anything serious, where I'm really going to rely on my shoe to give me more support to keep that foot locked down, to prevent rolling an ankle, etc. My third con with this model is that with this foam outsole, I mentioned earlier that on that perk it says like it's going to be super durable. I'm not sure that's going to necessarily be the case, because with my Flow Velocity Wind 2, for example, using that shoe outdoors, the Flow outsole does break down a little bit faster. You don't have as much rubber tread to protect it. So if you're going to be using this shoe for an everyday driver or for outdoor running, I'm not convinced that this Flow midsole is going to last you a while. So definitely keep an eye on that, because that is something that is pretty typical with most running shoes and training shoes that feature this foam tread. It's great for giving you a lightweight feel, but typically they don't last as long with shoes with rubber outsoles. So that all being said, the Under Armour Flow Dynamic, I could see it working in certain contexts, but I think for the vast majority of athletes and lifters who want these for any form of serious training, I would say pass on them. But now let's talk about the performance of this shoe, and I'll elaborate a little bit more as to why I don't really enjoy this shoe for most of my training context. To break down the performance of the Under Armour Flow Dynamic, I'm going to break this section to a few different parts. I'll talk about the shoe's performance for lifting, versatile training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, the shoe will once again work for very light training sessions. However, with this Flow midsole and the toe spring and the heel beveling back here, this is not going to be your shoe for strength training. So honestly, while the shoe could be a hybrid shoe in certain contexts, I don't call it a real true hybrid shoe because it doesn't deliver from the strength training component if you want a model for some serious strength work, but then also some short runs where you're going to be blending all that together in a training session. This model's stability is probably going to be capped around 275. I honestly worked up to 245 in this model and started to have a little bit of compression. I was called it there because truthfully, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to see that this foam midsole is not going to give you the stability that you need for any form of like back squat, deadlift, etc., where you're planning to load it. So if you want a shoe for just general strength work, this model can work. However, I would say keep it much lighter. I would also not use this shoe on machines because with this foam tread, you're gonna have slip on platforms. So it delivers to some extent, but it's not gonna be the shoe for anybody who really wants to push their strength training and lifting. When it comes to versatile training, the shoe also does an okay job for casual use. I mentioned this in my pros, but if you're wanting the shoe for like some casual HIIT workouts or even some more casual cross training where you're not doing a ton of stuff, where you're gonna be doing multi-directional work into the forefoot or doing a little bit more advanced plyos like broad jumps where you are gonna need more upper security, you're gonna want more grip through the forefoot, then they will work. However, if you are an athlete or if you're somebody who likes to add in more advanced plyometrics into your training sessions, or if you want more upper security, pass on this shoe. I'm telling you, save yourself the money because I wish I had. This upper security of the knit just doesn't deliver when it comes to any form of multi-directional work, in my opinion. And with the tread lacking on turf, it honestly kind of knocks this shoe's overall performance for being like a good athlete-focused shoe. I just don't think it's going to deliver what you want out of it when it comes to giving you the security and the grip for a versatile training context. When it comes to short runs, this model does a pretty good job. I have found them to be really comfortable for my runs that are like 3 to 4-ish miles. So for my hybrid workouts, I will slap these on and use them for my interval runs or my half miles, and they are pretty dang comfortable. And do note, I've been using these on the assault runner and the treadmill. I have not taken them outside because with the Under Armour Flow Velocity Wind 2's outsole, it broke down pretty quick outside, so I'm not trying to push this outsole as well since it is a similar flow build to that model. So I'm going to be using this shoe primarily for my treadmill and assault running where I'm going to be doing interval work because this model does deliver in that context, feels responsive. The upper gives you enough security for that style of running. So overall for short runs, this model does deliver. But again, I bought this shoe with the hopes that it's going to be a little bit more hybrid focused, but in reality, I've only now limited them to my running because they have performed that poorly for my versatile training and any form of like strength work. So if you're going to be buying this shoe, you're probably going to want to limit them to mostly your running and then maybe some work, as I've already mentioned in this review. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe is comfortable, and I think if you're going to be wearing them primarily indoors, so let's say you're on your feet all day for work or whatever and you're working inside, this model will work pretty well. It's going to deliver you a nice comfortable feel. The knit upper breathes pretty well. But if you're going to be wearing these outdoors, or if you want a shoe that you can wear to the gym and then trek around on the concrete for miles, this probably won't be your best bet because I think this Flow midsole will break down a little bit quicker on you, so you will not get the most out of your investment. So when it comes to daily wear, it's comfortable for indoor contexts or certain contexts where you're not going to be wearing them forever. But if you want a shoe that you can wear outside and walk around in, you might want to look into a model that has a rubber outsole because that will give you a little bit more durability long term. For the Under Armour Flow Dynamic, you can expect to pay $130 USD. So this is similar to other premium cross-training shoes and running shoes on the market. However, I think if you're going to invest in this shoe, I would say really make sure you understand where it's going to perform well and where it's going to fall short, and then cross-reference that with your use cases. That way you don't invest in the shoe and then be like me and only use them for one activity when you wanted them for a little bit of everything. So definitely make sure you understand where this shoe is going to excel before investing in them to get the most out of your money. All right, so now to answer the question, who should invest in the Under Armour Flow Dynamic? So I think if you're somebody who plans to invest in the shoe primarily for running with some light cross training and lifting, and you like your training shoes to have a slightly more running shoe fit and feel, then this model can make sense. However, I think for the vast majority of folks, I would say pass on this shoe. For $130 USD, I think there are stronger performing shoes that will outperform this shoe for lifting, cross training, and some short running. So if you want the shoe for hybrid style work, honestly, I think there are better models on the market. Plus, when you look at some of the call outs on the Under Armour product page, I just don't think the shoe delivers, and I think it's a little bit misleading. So if it's designed to be a shoe for like athletes and whatnot, I don't think it's really going to deliver when they start getting serious with their training. So that being said, I'm not the biggest fan of the Flow Dynamic, and I'm having a really tough time trying to figure out like, okay, but like really where does this shoe fit into the spectrum of shoes regarding specificity and performance? So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Under Armour Flow Dynamic, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. Their length fits true and they have a neutral width or a regular fit per Under Armour site. Now there are a couple of exceptions there. So I think if you have narrow width feet, or if you typically have a good amount of room at the end of your toe box, you might want to actually size down a half size in this model, because with this knit upper lacking security, I think you'll get a little bit more if you don't have a ton of room to where you're gonna be sliding around. And then on top of that, if you have exceptionally wide feet, you might want to pass on the shoe entirely, because with this knit upper, once again, lacking security, you're a population that I could see having more spillover issues than folks with slightly slimmer feet. All right, now let's cover the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the Flow Dynamic. For my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 9.35 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this model is 8 millimeters, and this model does have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the Under Armour Flow Dynamic. Up here around the toe box going into the midfoot, we have that Intella knit upper. Once again, it is very stretchy. It does have a nice level of breathability. And so while I like it for breathability and comfort, I just think it lacks that security. And I think in future models, having more lateral support on the forefoot or a more beefy toe guard, that would do wonders for the shoe's overall upper security. Looking at the boot back here, we have like this booty style construction. However, it's not really a true booty style. We do have this plush heel, and then we also have a little bit of padding around the heel as well. It makes this shoe a little bit easier to slip on and off, but again, I'm not convinced that this is gonna last forever because this knit is just so stretchy, so definitely keep that in mind. You have 2 loops here on the tongue and back here on the heel. Looking at the midfoot, you have 5 core eyelets that wrap up, and then you have that single piece of Flow midsole that goes throughout the shoe, so this Flow midsole is pretty consistent throughout, has a nice level of responsiveness, and when looking at the outsole here, it is this foam Flow midsole as well. There is no rubber tread on the shoe, so once again, that's also why I'm not the biggest fan of the shoe's grip and long-term durability. Looking at the TPU layer here, we do have a TPU layer here for additional support. However, that really only works at the ankle. You're not going to have much support up here through the forefoot, and you don't have a ton of support here on the medial side like you do here on the lateral side. Overall, though, that pretty much wraps up the gist of the shoe's construction. I think there are a ton of areas where the shoe can be improved on future iterations, and some of the construction features on this model feel a little bit lax. If you have additional questions on the construction of the shoe, drop a comment down below. All right, guys, that wraps up my review of the Under Armour Flow Dynamic. Overall, I am not the biggest fan of this shoe. I think it's a really cool idea in the context of what the shoe is designed to do, but it just doesn't deliver, and it needs a couple of tweaks to make it a really strong performer in the context of being like a really good like athlete-focused shoe or cross-training shoe at that, where you can do a little bit of everything in it. If you have additional questions on the Flow Dynamic, drop a comment down below, or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.